Hello, dental online trainers, and welcome to the Dental Online Training Sharecast. I'm your host, Dr. Dennis Hartlieb. Each month, we'll talk with dental experts who are doing amazing work in the world of dentistry. Also, occasionally, I'm going to throw in a few of my solo-bodied Sharecasts, where I share a little with you about what I've learned along the way during my career. So tune in the first Tuesday of every month to hear the latest episodes. Hey, dental online trainers. Thank you for tuning back in to hear the second part of my wonderful interview with Dr. Nate Lawson on his experience in dentistry as both a dentist, as someone who started into a PROS program, someone who got interested in dental research, and sort of his life as an academician, someone who's actually head of research at University of Alabama, Birmingham. If you missed the first part of the interview, which I would highly recommend you go back and listen to, you can check it out on Apple Podcasts or on YouTube, which will be linked in the description. We hope you enjoy the rest of this interview as much as I enjoyed speaking with Nate. And be on the lookout in just a couple of weeks when we drop our next Sharecast episode. As always, yours for better dentistry. I'm Dr. Dennis Hartlieb. Yeah, but you loved it enough that you then set off for a PROS program after you finished your PhD, right? Which is crazy.
Yeah, the PROS program was a little bit of so when you finish the DMD PhD program, there's kind of an expectation that either one, you'll go off and do a postdoc to continue your further research, or you'll look for an academic job, which are kind of hard to get, right out of a DMD PhD, because most research positions, they're going to want you to pull some kind of funding. Or the very other popular option was for people to go into specialty program. So because then they'll think, you finish your specialty program, then you can apply for an academic job and you'll get hired within PROS or perio, endo, or oral surgery, and you get hired in a department and then kind of grow your research profile from there. And I was like, I definitely didn't want to do a postdoc. That wasn't in something I was, now I kind of wish it wouldn't have been a bad thing. I just, at that time, I didn't, in the field of dental biomaterials, there's not a lot of postdoc positions for studying bond strength of adhesives. It wasn't there for what I was doing. So I was like, well, I guess I'll do a residency program. I always thought I wanted to be a pediatric dentist because my aunt, who was a pediatric dentist, and I saw that. And so, but I didn't think that, one, I didn't think I'd be able to get in because I struggled so much in dental school and my grades weren't very hot. And then two, I hadn't done, I think the only thing I'd ever done in pediatric and dental school is I prepped a tooth for a stainless steel crown on a dentiform, and then I put the crown on backwards. I said, nice job, but this is backwards. And I was like, well, maybe I'm not qualified to be a pediatric dentist. So what happened was I applied for PROS. I got into the program I really wanted to go to, which was at UIC. And in the summer before, or a couple of months before I started the PROS program, I was able to finish my PhD a little early, and I went and worked at some of these DSO clinics in Alabama where I just saw kids nonstop. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is how you put on a stainless steel crown the right way. And I was doing space maintainers and seeing all these kids, and I was like, oh, okay. I wasn't great at it, but I was like, at least this, how I can see, I can kind of do this. And then I started having these feelings of, well, now I'm set up to do this PROS program, and now I found out I actually can see kids, but let's go up to the PROS program and give it a shot. And I moved to Chicago. My life was great all of a sudden, because now I'm in Chicago with my family's nearby and all my friends from high school, and I was and just in the city, and there's a Trader Joe's and things to do. And I was like, oh my God, this is so much better. And then I go to the PROS program, and they're like, well, here's 90 articles that instead of going out and, enjoying Chicago, you're going to spend your time reading these 90 articles, and, here's the lab where you're going to be living. And I started, and I was just like, oh, I already wasn't that strong clinically. And I get in the PROS program, and I'm just like, what is going on here? And I always like telling the stories. I remember calling up one of my good buddies. I had graduated dental school in 2011 because of the PhD. I'm 1 year behind my friends who had already been out practicing for a year. So I'm in my first semester of PROS, and all you do in your first semester of PROS is take alginates to try to make dentures, or to reinsert those little inserts that go into the all-on-X prosthesis from the previously graduated students that fell out. So you're just fixing their problems and taking alginists for denture impressions, and then trying to mount cases to try to sell treatment plans that no one's ever going to accept because you're this like brand new dentist that has no idea what you're talking about. And so it's just nothing but frustration that first semester. And my friends, meanwhile, out in practice, and they're like, I'm doing a full mouth rehab and I'm doing all on X cases, and you're just taking alginets. And I just thought, what am I doing? I mean, later on, I go to find out that my friends that were doing that, now they don't do that at all. And the people that I went to pros with are out there doing crazy prosthesis and really great things. And if I'd stuck with it, it's a great specialty. But I just, that time I couldn't see that. And I couldn't see through it. And I looked at the pedo residents. They'd be out there like, 4:30, they were out the door getting ready to party because, they didn't have to go to the lab. And I was like, that seems better. And so while I was in the process residency, I sent out applications for pedo, and I applied to pedo in that first semester. I had a couple interviews, like gave an interview at UIC, like I took my scrubs off in the bathroom, in the pedo floor, and put on a suit. And I went in and interviewed in pedo, and then went back in the bathroom and put scrubs on. Like I thought no one would know. Of course, it's everybody.
Yeah, it's a small world.
It's a small world. In the dental school, the pedo faculty like probably went to the pros people and said, you one of your guys is applying for our program. What's going on there? And so I did that, and then what happens? I think the match day for pedo is in January. In December, I was thinking about this as like, if I don't quit pros, I'm gonna have to pay for another semester. So, and I don't know that I love this, so I'm gonna quit this and take the chance that I'll get into pedo. Quit pros. January, it's actually on my birthday, is the day when they released pass, and I get the email that says you have not gotten accepted anywhere. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was crushing. Okay. And I felt so bad, but yeah, I was like, well, let's see what, maybe I'll reapply. I had this part-time job working for a DSO in Chicago while I was in pros, and I was like, I just called them and said, can I work for you guys full-time? They said, sure. So I was doing that, just working full-time in this DSO clinic, which was, an interesting time because I was able to pick up my speed and become a little bit more confident clinically. Like looking back on it, some of the dentistry I was doing at the time was not the best. I wasn't taking CE. I wasn't passionate about dentistry yet. And I look back at some of those patients I treated, and I still feel bad about some of the poor decisions that I had made. And, kind of still feel bad about some of that to this day. I just don't think I knew better that some of the things that they're pushing in those clinics was maybe overly aggressive.
Can we pause on this? Because I'm curious. Yeah. I literally have no experience as a DSO dentist. So, I mean, I've been doing this for 35 years. And when I got out of school, Sears Dental actually was starting dental clinics when I got out in 1988. But, the reality is the whole profession's changed. The cost of dental school education, the availability of getting associate positions has changed, significantly. And so for many dentists, their only option is working in a DSO. So I don't have experience. What advice do you give for someone who's looking at joining a DSO? I mean, you get lots and lots of reps. Yeah. Some people say, well, it's like doing a bad golf swing a bunch of times. You're just going to have a bad golf swing that's going to be harder to correct when you want to start correcting it. Yeah. But what advice do you have for someone who's joining a DSO, in a DSO, thinking about a DSO? How do you, because I think it's a reality. There's many dentists that are going to need to do that.
I mean, I did it because, at that time it was going to be a consistent $600 a day paycheck working from the DSO. And then they eventually switched it to 30% production, which I think I was making more than the $600 a day when they switched it to 30% production. And I had a part-time associate job where some weeks I might make like $100. I mean, it was very variable, and it wasn't as steady as the DSO job. I would say the other thing that if I could go back and talk to myself working at that DSO is just to keep my ethics about me and not to be influenced by, there were managers. You had non-clinical managers that would come in and kind of review cases with you and say, that there was a lesion there in an x-ray that was, might have just been in the enamel. Like it's not one that, now I would never drill into. They said, you're missing things in x-rays. One of the big policies of the clinic DSO I worked for was that we didn't do any stainless steel crowns. We saw all these kids and we do all these pulpotomies and we just pack them full of amalgam. And I knew in my heart that that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to do stainless steel crown after pulpotomy. But it was a company policy, and I tried to complain about it in a I wasn't quite Zoom, but whatever I had at the time, maybe a conference call. And I said, I was always taught in dental school, we have to do stainless steel crowns. They said, well, if you want to do a stainless crown on a kid after pulpotomy, you just have to write us a letter and then we'll approve it. And I'm thinking, I want to stop my procedure, take my gloves off, write a letter, and then wait. I mean, it was an insane thing that I just didn't press because I was like, I guess everyone else is doing it. We used to, I'm trying to think of some other, I mean, some of it, I don't want to totally blame the management or even the environment I was in. I mean, some of it could have been myself too, just just thinking like, well, I guess I'm out of dental school now. I don't have to, like some of the things they taught me in dental school, I don't have to do anymore because, those were silly things like
rubber dam,
rubber dam for sure.
Right. Yeah.
Even rubber dam during endo was like a very controversial. I mean, there were so many people doing rubber dams, endo without rubber dams, and like now I just look back and I was like, that's insane.
Right.
I'm trying to think some of the bad. I mean, there was some of it was like, insurance fraud, almost like everybody. Like so many times I'd see sealants art. I mean, that was a big moneymaker with sealants, and I'd see sealants done on teeth that hadn't even been erupted yet. And I was like, how is this? I mean, I never went into that level. I mean, even at that time I had some
ethical guidance. Yeah.
But like, yeah, I mean, more of like, I think so. I mean, like stained grooves being treated with large restorations, and just I don't know, just some of the practices in the DSO were kind of driven, I think, by finances and and not to say though that every DSO is bad. No, I mean I would say like when I was in the DSO, we never were provided. There was no continuing education whatsoever. Like that was not a thing. And now I see some of these DSOs sending their docs to do
continuing and stuff
courses, and I'm not saying that DSO. I don't know. I mean, I think there's probably better ones out there now than when I was in it. But when I was in it, it was not the greatest thing. And I used to like sleep in bed at night just thinking, one, I mean, if I'm going to be very selfish, I was like, am I going to get sued and lose my license? And like, two, am I like helping humanity, or am I, I think that's one thing I like about dentistry is that I feel like it's a kind of noble job. I mean, it's part of the health system. And I was like, is this no longer noble what I'm doing? Like, even if I'm making money.
Right. I mean, there's a fine line. We're here to serve. And you have to take care of yourself, right? You have to make money and stuff. And I think, I mean, and having talked to other people who've been in DSOs and stuff, I think they really hit on the same thing you said, is that you have to just manage your integrity, right? You're gonna get pressures to do things that maybe are outside of your beliefs, and how do you manage that? And I think that's got to be the hardest thing, right? I think it's true in private practice too, right? It's like there's no one looking, so it doesn't matter if this margin's open, right? So that I think is. There's, I think, probably more pressure if you're in DSO, though. If you're in private practice, you got to pay the bills too. And so I think people have the same pressures, just sort of different. And I think it's just going to boil down on, who you are. And there's old scripture that says, I'm going to blow how it goes. Days are scrolls, write on them only what you want remembered. And I like that, because days are scrolls, only write on them what you want remembered. And so look, I'm not perfect at that for sure.
Yeah.
But but it is something that I think that's for young dentists as they're getting into that. I think it's something for them to sort of weigh and consider. Right? How does this fit into what I believe to be ethical in my dentistry, and what should I accept, and where do I draw the line? That's got to be tough, though. Got to be very tough in those positions.
Yeah. I mean, it is, especially when you kind of look at, I mean, because in the DSO world, you're often working with many other dentists. And so you can see, there's always going to be someone there publicly kind of like doing dentistry that's super unethical or super aggressive, and then you think, well, I'm not as bad as that. Kind of like in this weird mindset of like what is okay and what's not okay.
Yeah.
And the other thing we had none of was mentorship. Like there's a period of time when I had been like out of school for like less than a year, and I was the senior dentist somehow. They're like, oh, go ask Lawson because he's been here for 8 months and he'll know how to do it. And I was like,
God.
looking back at it, I was like, it's like the blind leading the blind sometimes. Because yeah, there was really no clinical mentorship whatsoever. And I would think that was, I mean, I'm jumping ahead here, but I would say that was one of the things that really was wonderful for me. There's a guy, I'm not sure. Have you met Augusto Robles?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So he was a faculty member when I was in dental school, and we weren't particularly close then because he was the rubber dam guy, and I think I was always like intimidated to work with him. And at that point in time, I was just like trying to get through. And so, I mean, I always liked him. He's always nice, but we weren't particularly close when I was in dental school. And I came back and started teaching. I think Burgess was the one that told me, he's like, we got a guy working in the clinical research, and I think he'd be a great person that you'll really like working with, named Augusto Robles. I was like, oh, I know him. So we became closer when I came back and started teaching. And I think I always give him credit for like changing my attitude towards dentistry. He just became a real good clinical mentor to me because he was someone I could go to with clinical questions, and he just made it. I think in dental school, I was so afraid to ask questions to faculty because I would always turn, what do you think? And what did you learn? And what do you remember? And it made me feel bad if I didn't remember something. And he always just made it he was always so approachable to me, and he made me feel good about myself, even when I asked a dumb question. And, and he would just break things down for me, and he always just made me feel like I should go ask him questions. And it was just a totally different, I'm lucky that I have more mentors like that and people that I feel like I can go ask questions to. Like I asked you a question about cases, offline before we started, but like before him, I just never, I didn't totally have that. And he just like, I owe him so much. I tell him all the time, I call him, the thing that irritates him is I call him my Mr. Miyagi, from a Karate Kid. And I think he at first is like, how old do you think I am? Not the age thing. I just like that reference. But he is like my, he was like my clinical mentor that really changed my, my enjoyment of clinical dentistry. And so that's always one of my big messages to people, is to find that clinical.
Dental line trainers, listen up, man. That is, we talk about this all the time. Find a mentor. There's this, it's such a difficult career. I mean, I love dentistry, but dang, it's hard. Every aspect of private practice dentistry is hard. Doing the dentistry, I mean, I'm still challenged. I mean, I do not chit chat while I'm doing dentistry because I got to concentrate on what I'm doing, and keeping things isolated. And now with staffing, that's become just such a challenge. Dentistry is challenging. Find mentors, find people that you can talk to, join study clubs, do whatever you got to do so you're around people and you're not isolated, and you find people who are like thinkers and people who will help guide you through your process. I mean, I'd be nowhere without people like Alan Rosenfeld was a periodontist that held my hand when I was just this neophyte dentist. And, he literally guided me on who I should be seeing and the way I should be thinking and how I should be talking to patients. And, there's a zillion mentors that I've had, but you got to reach out. It's on the protege's responsibility to find the mentor. It's not the mentor's responsibility to go find the protege.
That's so funny that you said about the thing about chit-chatting, because I was listening to when I was working in the op yesterday, there was someone next to me that was talking to the patient the whole time, and I was like, how can they talk to the patient and work on them? And it makes me feel better that even you need to focus when you do dentistry, you don't chit-chat. Because I was like, yeah, the whole time I'm in there, I'm like, if the patient asks me a question, it might take me like 2 minutes before I even realize that they asked me a question, because I have to like focus on the what I'm doing. So it makes me feel better that even you
gotcha.
Chat. Go ahead.
We've digressed a bit, but this is great because that's how these things go. I'm super curious how you ended up, though. So you leave the pros, and I've talked to people who've gone through pros. I did not, and man, if you want to know who's in the dental school at night besides the custodian, it's the pros residents. They're
Yeah.
they open and close the dental school, and it's real. And so, hats off and give respect to your prosthodontists because they earned it.
Yeah.
But now you're out, and so now you're doing some practicing. And then how do you end up then with Burgess again?
So I think he was in town for some meeting in Chicago, and he took me out to some steakhouse. I remember for dinner. I can't remember what meeting it was. Would you ever think about coming back and teaching at the dental school? And for me, it wasn't that when he said come back and teaching at the dental school, it wasn't like, oh, I don't want to go back and teach at the dental school. I was like, do I want to return to Birmingham, Alabama, which I just felt like I had been, brought into this wonderful world of Chicago again, and that was just really hard for me to be like. I mean, I didn't have like teaching opportunities or any of the other great opportunities in Chicago. And so he talked about this thing. And I was like, it'd be great to get mentored again from research wise from Burgess, but can I go back to Birmingham? And I thought about it. I think some things would just, I always say I was in a quarter life crisis. I didn't know what my next plan was going to be career wise if I stayed in Chicago. So I was like, well, at least this is a plan. It's pretty good. And it's pretty great that Burgess is offering me this opportunity. So as much as I don't want to go back to Birmingham, I'll do this. And so I went, took them like 6 or 9 months to get the contract all worked out, and I went back down there. I went from making my I don't know, it was like 150. If you took figuring 6 days a week, whatever the daily minimum was, I was making somewhere in 150,000 working for that DSO in Chicago. And then when I applied for the job at Alabama, they said your pay will be somewhere between 85 and 125, and I got the contract and it said $85,000, and I was like, well, I didn't know I was like, I guess I didn't negotiate. I just took it, signed it, went down there, and it was a hard thing for me because I kind of felt like a little bit like a loser because I just dropped out of pros. I had just not gotten into pedo practice. I didn't really I didn't come out of dental school with great accolades because I didn't have great grades. And I got this nice job working for Burgess at the dental school, but I wasn't making very much money. I didn't know a lot of people in Birmingham. So I rented out a room in this guy's house that I knew and had slept on a mattress and had actually the same cheap Kia desk I'm sitting on right now. I kept it all these years. And I would just bring my laptop home and eat dinner by myself. And I didn't feel, and when I walked around the dental school, I had just graduated from there not that long ago. Again, not being a great dental student, I walked down the halls. I did buy myself a bunch of cheap suits from a Brooks Brother outlet so I could wear suits to school to try to make myself feel like a real person.
Like an adult.
Like an adult. And I walked down the school and tried not to feel like a loser all the time, but I kind of did. But I kind of just worked away at the research and kind of, because I didn't have as much distractions, I kind of just could focus on the research. And one of the cool things was Burgess at that time had his residents doing a lot of projects, but they weren't being, he was so busy, he was doing everything by himself. He needed help writing some of these up into manuscripts. So I would just spend all my nights. Sometimes I would just stay in the dental school and I look at the clock. I'd be like, well, it's 12:30. I'll just keep on working and I'll be ready for the next day, and just sleep a little bit on their desk and wake up and I didn't have that much else going on in my life. So I would just work on these papers and get a lot of stuff published and sometimes I would walk up to the lab, do a little experiment, try some things out. And I was single, so I had literally no obligations whatsoever, and started kind of liking it and enjoying it, and got invited to go to some meetings. And at that time, Burgess was, he's a big speaker and he's, makes this content digestible. And so I was like, I wanted to follow in that footsteps. So I'd work on my presentations, and through the continuing education department at the school, they'd send me down to these little study clubs where there might be 8 people sitting there that had no idea what I was going to talk about and
Right.
were nice enough to listen to me, and they'd pay me really somewhere $150 or something like that. I was like, oh, this is great.
Right.
And I did that for a number of years, and and then I started feeling better about myself. At some point, also, what really helped me is I met my wife down here, and kind of that provided some stability in my life and just made me feel better about myself, I think, in general. And she's so that was nice, and it started as the kind of feeling more confident in meeting robots, feeling more comfortable clinically, and then doing more research stuff, and then working on my lectures a lot. I realized I really liked teaching, and I just love this idea of trying to make content more digestible, of because it was hard for me to learn in dental school, and I think everything was so complicated, and I'm realizing some of these things aren't that complex. And like when Robles would break them down to me, I'd be like, oh, what was the big deal about that? Why did they have to use all these 7 fancy words to describe something that's not that hard? And I think about, we were making this Instagram. I think one of the big things with the dental tube Instagram is trying to make complicated things easier. And then when I lecture, that's one of the things I like to do, and trying to make, the research. Sometimes I feel like one of the things with the DMD PhD is you're this bridge between the researcher and the clinician. And you find out sometimes I'd be in these meetings when you get a clinician and a researcher together, and the clinician would get a little intimidated because of the researcher, and the researcher would get intimidated by the clinician. And so the researcher starts using, modulus of elasticity and Poisson's ratio and these things because they're scared and they want to seem smart. And the clinician was like, well, biologic width and, the free residual margin, and they start saying and then it's like, come on, guys.
Two different languages, right? It's completely two different languages.
To say like the gums are, the gums are puffy, and the researcher could be like, okay, let's put something hard in there. I don't know, like whatever, just let's use normal people language and try to uncomplicate dentistry. And that's kind of my big passion, where I kind of felt like where I found the niche in dentistry was like trying to be this bridge between science and clinical, and have fun kind of trying to simplify things. And then it just started gaining some confidence. And I think once I started loving it, my pay from the school hasn't gone a lot better, but getting to do some external lecturing has brought in some additional income. So I started feeling a little bit better about myself. Like, hey, I'm making, I'm almost back to the point where I was when I first graduated from dental school,
right?
And then finally started making more than when I first graduated. I was like, oh my God, I've made it again. Like 10 years later, I finally make as much as I was when I first graduated.
One of the reasons I wanted to talk today was because of this circuitous path that you've taken. And at least for me, when I got out of dental school, and it's a long time ago, but I thought, oh, you just get out, you start practicing, you start making a bunch of money, and you're a successful dentist. And I think more often than not, in people that we've talked to on the Sharecast, it's not just going from point A to point B. There's a lot of points in between. I remember overhearing Bob Winter when I was way younger, and Bob was talking to a dentist. And if you don't know Bob Winter, he teaches out at Spear Institute, and he's just a phenomenal prosthodontist. And someone had said to Bob, I want to be able to do what you do. And Bob sort of like walked him through it. And I said, afterwards, he walks away, and I said, Bob, it's so unrealistic. You're just so naturally gifted. He goes, no, I spent 90 hours a week in my office in my lab being able to learn my craft. And if someone's willing to do that, and they're willing to go do the continuing education that I went through to learn from other ceramists and all that stuff, anyone can do it. But, are you willing to put in the effort to be able to get there? And I think that's oftentimes people think, oh, well, they just, it's sort of a 9-to-5 job and then they're done. But I think you point out the hours you put in so that you could do the journal articles that you did to learn what you did. That's it's more than just showing up. You got to do more than just show up. And then as you do more than just show up, then you start to appreciate it more, and you start to learn more, and I think then you start to love it even more. So I just love that as you talked about those nights when you stayed at the lab all night, because it's like, well, I could go home and shower and come back, but I can just stay here and get more done. And sometimes that's what it is as you're going through that stage of your career.
Yeah, I think that's something. It's so trite to say that. Like, if you can learn to love it, then like the money and feeling and confidence and stuff will come. But I think that was, I had to find the thing that I loved doing, which was figuring stuff out in the lab and trying to translate it into clinical knowledge and explaining it, and then I love it, and so then it's not work anymore, and so I don't always. Sometimes I think, man, I don't work very hard because I don't feel like I do the things that I hate doing, which are like reports and like evaluating staff and things that are like grading, or I don't know, the things that I think I'm supposed to. But then I realize, well, I spend all my time doing the stuff which I love, which is like analyzing data and like writing that into report. Like I forget that that's work too, and like making lectures for classes and stuff, and like it's like, oh yeah, I guess that I don't even consider that work because I love doing it so much. So like So yeah, that was, and I think that's a great. I mean, something that I wouldn't realize that there are alternative paths in in dentistry. Like I mean, academics is a path that I didn't think I want. I honestly I didn't think I wanted to go into it because I knew that the pay is not as good.
Sure.
But I mean, if you love what you're doing, I don't know. It's somehow it works out. I mean, we got good pension plans in
Right.
academics, and I got a 403b, which is like a 401k, and we get a lot of vacation days. So there's other little perks, aside from the money that can some ways make up for in the academic job.
Uh,
So
and I think someone like you that's really good at sharing and enjoys sharing their information. I think that, is such a great avenue for you, and you get to be doing stuff day to day that you love doing. I have a question with research. I've always wondered, how do you figure out like your next research project? Like, do you ever get stressed out, like, oh my God, I got to come up with a project? Or are they like dominoes? Or are they just falling one after the next? How's that
Oh,
work?
no, I always like being very open about this. I mean, how our lab runs. I mean, the school pays half of my salary, and the other half of my salary I have to come up with, and that's from grants. I mean, you think grants, I think most people think government grants, NIH grants, but in biomaterials, those, unless I'm going to be developing some kind of new polymer, it's not like there's a lot of NIH grants for biomaterials. So they're coming from industry. So if 3M does like RGC, whatever, they'll come to us with a research project that they want to have done, and then they'll fund them to the tune tens of thousands of dollars. And sometimes it's external validation of a property they just want to be able to use for marketing, to say, okay, this isn't just something that we say internal data. This is something that has been tested by a university. And so sometimes that's how projects come to us, as a new product's coming out, and they want us either to do the testing for marketing, or sometimes they want to do it. Like we had a company recently that wanted to put out a new composite, and they were really concerned with shrinkage stress. And so they came and had us evaluate it, and we sent them back data, and was like, oh, it's not, not so good. So they're reformulating it. So those projects will come in. That's where the majority of that's where all of the funded research comes in. And then the other projects, a lot of times, are like master's students projects. So either prosthetics or endo or pedo, or I run a 2-year biomaterials residency program. So there are master's projects, and those ones, yeah. I mean, there's so many clinical problems out there that we never have. There's always something to test. Like right now, we've got a student. She's looking at injection molding, like clear PVS materials, how much light goes through them if you want to cure through a clear PVS material, and flowable composites, like how do they rank as far as like polishability and translucency,
Yeah.
density and strength, where for doing injection molding. And we've got another student. You mentioned offline about bioactive. So we have a student doing a project right now we have a test for bioactivity, where we put bioactive materials into teeth, try to grow caries around them in acid solutions, and then take them out and section through the teeth and look to see if the part of the tooth next to the restoration has become demineralized or not. And so we're doing some tests as a master's project for one of our students. That project is not testing new materials. It's just trying to see if there's an easier way to do the test, because as it stands, it's such a hard test to do, to section these teeth in a really small section to look for demineralization with a microscope. We got a new hardness machine, trying to see if we could do hardness of the enamel next to the restoration, rather than thin sectioning and looking under a microscope. So yeah, we're always and I get great inspiration from the internet. Like sometimes I'll be scrolling through Facebook or Instagram and see people debating about some clinical topic, and I can't find a good solution or a clinical problem I had. Or maybe I have a conversation with you and I see something in your lecture and I'm like, that was a really good, clinical way to do things, or clinical challenge, and maybe we can test it in the lab. So yeah, the inspiration, never run out of project ideas in the lab. Yeah.
Sounds so fun.
It is fun. It's also could be frustrating though. Like yesterday, I told you about that project we're doing with bioactive materials. We sectioned some teeth yesterday and it didn't work at all. This was like probably 3 months. This resident's been like collecting teeth and putting holes in them and putting them in acid for a month, and then taking them and bedding them and now sectioning them, and we're looking at the microscope, and I was just like, I just told him, like, I don't see it. I don't see the demineralization that we normally see. I don't know where it went wrong, and I'm just like, God, so frustrated.
How many people are like in the lab with you, like in the average day, and you're in there? How many like residents are in there? What's it look like for someone who's never been in a a dental research lab?
Our lab, if you went in there right now, I've got 2 residents in there. My dad is a retired engineer. He comes in 3 days a week. And then I spend a lot of time in the lab. Like, I should be in my office and like probably on my computer more. Sometimes I just bring my laptop and work in the lab. Just, I like being in there more than I like being in my office. Typically our program will have, try to get around 6 residents, but we just had some things with visa issues where a bunch of our first-year residents couldn't make it, and one of our residents went home. So it's like last year, if you would come up any given day, there'd have been like 4 or 5 residents in our about, I don't know, 1,000 square foot lab working on different machines, making specimens or testing specimens. And then I'll usually let one college student come in. So we have one college student that comes in a couple of days a week, and we've got about probably 4 or 5 dental students. Dental students are so hard to schedule. They're so busy. They always want to do a research project. And I always tell them, like, do you really want to do this? Because you have no time. I don't, and it's like, I feel bad turning away, but it's like, you're going to have tests and things are going to come up and you have a life. Like, I don't think you have time to do this. And so sometimes they start and they can't finish, or sometimes they'll start and then we reduce the scale of what they can do. But so we have college students come in a little bit and help. And it's kind of, I would say the hardest thing about doing it, and if anybody, dental students or residents or anybody listening to this, that like the capacity of the lab oftentimes isn't necessarily the equipment, it's the mentorship. Because if somebody comes in and tries to start a project, like they say, oh, it's not that big a deal, there's one little project. But you have to imagine, in my head, I've got like 3 PROS residents and 4 biomaterials residents and 5 dental students, and I only find out about when something doesn't work. And so I'm like, there's only so many like machines I can try to troubleshoot and protocols I can try to troubleshoot at a time. So that's I would say is the challenge with student resident research, is like, either you have to take a lot of initiative on your own to troubleshoot your own problems, or your mentor runs into capacity issues with how many things they can troubleshoot. So that's my limitation for doing more projects. I mean, we have square footage enough to have more people sitting in there.
Right.
It's just capacity of mentorship.
Oh, that's very interesting. I would never have thought about that, but I guess, there's got to be someone that's overseeing everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Nate, this has just been awesome. Like I said, we had a chance to talk when you were up in Milwaukee at your presentation. And as we were talking, I'm like, oh my God, this is, I want to pull the string on this because it was so interesting. And I'll tell you, I'll tell you a story. So I'll give you some advice for when you retire. So when I was at Michigan, there was, I hated dental materials when I was in dental school. Like, so me and my buddy Greg and Frank, we'd sit in the very back row, and it was stadium seating. And I'll never forget where I sat. And I would fall asleep every dental materials class, and I would wake up in a pool of drool. And because I just couldn't relate it to what we were doing in dentistry. It didn't make any, it didn't seem to matter. We were looking at creepage of amalgam. We're looking at copalite and, hardness of different gold and stuff like that. I'm like, just tell me what to use. But having gotten out, it's like, I don't know how you practice without knowing that stuff. It's so critical to understand what materials you're using and how they're going to react, and not to the level of a researcher, but certainly with more confidence and understanding. The guy who was our senior teacher was a guy named Camille Asgar, and Camille had the patent for Titan amalgam. So back in the day, this was the first like encapsulated amalgam. When you, instead of mixing it by hand, you'd put in a little plastic thing, it would put in the amalgamator and it would shake it up. So we had the patent for it. So Camille would come in with his 3-piece, perfectly tailored suits, and he was dressed to the nines, and he was awesome. And so our senior year was his last year of teaching. And so for our final, we're all seated in the final. There's 125 of us, and he walks in, and he's, dressed to the nines, and he says, I'm not really not in the mood for this. What do you say we go get breakfast? And so he
Right.
paraded 125 students out of the dental school to the building across the street, which is the Michigan League, and they had a little buffet counter. And he literally bought breakfast for 125
Oh my
senior dental
gosh.
students as his like going away present to us. And so, Nate, keep that in mind when the time comes. That I think that
Might
was like,
like invent some kind of material to build up the funding for that project. But yeah, that's
and
pretty
trust me,
cool.
as dental students, we were quite hungry. So I don't think anyone ate light when, when Camille was paying for it. So Dr. Asgar, thank you. I never got
Yeah,
to thank you personally, but that's a fond memory I have of my fourth year in dental school.
well, that's cool. Um,
I always leave off, Nate, if we already talked about mentorship for young dentists and dental students and stuff like that, people coming out. And I think that's important for, people who have been practicing as long as I have. I still, rely on my colleagues for, issues and treatment planning and stuff like that. What else would you recommend people coming into dental school and people who are just sort of recently graduating? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, aside from, obviously mentorship changed my life. I mean, another thing that and this is gonna feel, sometimes like giving this advice feels strange as someone that offers continuing education, as do you. But I mean, it, I wish I would have gotten into doing more continuing education earlier, because just to be very honest, I mean, probably what kept me from doing it initially was I was this poor student. Like I wasn't used to spending $100 on anything, much less $1,000 on anything, because I would, my clothes were cheap, my car was cheap, everything was
Yeah.
cheap as a student. And then all of a sudden I get a little bit of income, and it's like the last thing on earth I'm going to pay for it is like dental education, because I just was tortured with that for 4 years in dental school. But then I look at it and it's like, that is like a path to happiness, is like learning to love this career that you picked. It's like if you graduated from dental school, it's too late. You're not going to go back and be a computer programmer or something. I mean, you
Right.
could, but that would be a lot more expensive. So might as well learn to love the thing that you're doing. So I mean that's I think another thing that I would have wish that I would have done more is continuing education and organized dentistry. I mean, organized dentistry, because also, the hard thing was like, how do you find a mentor? Like, if you're in a DSO, which is you and a bunch of other 20-something-year-olds, like, how do you find that? And then if you do, like, I would say, well, I would go to like the midwinter meeting. And midwinter is great, but it's like you're not gonna find a mentor at the midwinter.
No.
There's too many people there. Like a smaller study club where there's, speaking in a lot of study clubs now, I go to these study clubs and I see a lot of them, they're like dying to find new members. And it's like a room full of mentors and no mentees
Mhm.
in some of these smaller study clubs. And sometimes I'll go there and I'll see like a young dentist in there that's just killing it. They got all these people mentoring them and trying to help them, and specialists trying to work with them. And it's just like, wow, they just made a little investment in finding this study club to join it, and maybe it cost them $1,500 to join it, or 18 or 2,000, whatever, to join it. But now they're like, it's like to have access to all these people just dying to mentor them. So that's, I think that's maybe something I didn't realize when I was just coming out of dental school.
That's a great point. I mean, I can tell you for sure my growth in dentistry is because I joined a study club when I was recently out of school. I was at a dental lab, going over a case, and a guy named Brian Vence came in. I don't know. Do you know Brian? He practices in the Chicago area. Phenomenal dentist, incredibly skilled. And Brian walked in. He was a little older than me, a couple of years older, and he said, "Hey, I'm starting the study club." I'm like, "What's a study club?" And he just had a few guys that were meeting at someone's office and sitting around doing treatment planning on cases. And 35 years later, or maybe 32 years later, the study club's still active. We got 20 members, and we joined with the dental forum for a meeting that you were up with. And the information I've learned and the contacts and the colleagues, the mentorship, all that stuff, I can tell you for sure I wouldn't be, doing the stuff I'm doing if it hadn't been from just that happenstance moment, Brian walking in saying, "Hey, you want to join a study club?" So actively, and there's tons more out there now, right, between Seattle study clubs and Spear study clubs, and there's a zillion of them. So just get in. If you're a young dentist and you're out there, just look, Google in your area for a dental study club, or talk to your periodontist or oral surgeon, and just get involved, and you'll start meeting people that can, if you're lucky like me, it's going to change your life only for the positive. So yeah, I think that's great advice.
Thanks, Dennis. And yeah, I also want to say, thank you for having me on. You're like one of those people. I mean, like you said, we're still we've known each other for a little bit now, but we're still kind of getting to know each other. But I just really appreciate you always a very like a very real person and like a real listener and just yeah, it's been such a pleasure. I mean, it's funny because like I knew about you before I knew you, and sometimes you never know with a personality, like, are they going to be a real person? And then when I met you, I was like, oh my God, he's such a nice guy. And you listen to me and like remember things about me. And like, I don't know, you're just such a deep and nice person. And then when you get to watch you lecture, I appreciate it that it's like, you're not just trying to show off and it's that real person about you shows even the way you lecture. And so, yeah, it's been a real pleasure to get to have this conversation with you. And like I said, I started off this morning in not the best mood, just from my daily life, and it's been really fun, and I really I'm excited that I enjoyed getting this chance to chat with you, and so thank you for
You're welcome, Nate. Thanks for that. That was very sweet. I tell you, I can talk about two things all day long: Michigan football and dentistry. And I know it's odd. I mean, so my social skills are pretty limited, right? So people come at me with some other stuff. I'm at a huge disadvantage, but if you want to talk about college football, I'm all ears. And if you want to just hang out and talk about dentistry, God, I just adore it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm so blessed to be in a profession. I mean, I think we're so lucky that we're not practicing the way dentistry was 40 years ago when we were so limited in the materials. And I think, it was more, I mean, there was some great dentistry and certainly Dawson coming out, and there's so much stuff that was coming out, but man, it's just, I mean, it's the things that we get to do in dentistry today. It's just unreal. We're so blessed, so fortunate. So, and for people like you that are behind the scenes and then sharing that information, I can't thank you enough. This stuff's so vital for us to be able to practice and do our practicing well. So thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. Thanks for having me. Thanks.
And Nate's a father, and he's going to be another father soon. So I know there's all the pressures of parenthood along with everything else in practice. And so I'm very appreciative and look forward to seeing you at future meetings. For our dental online trainers, thank you for joining us for just this great chat with someone that I'm really we're getting to know better and better. And he's going to be a real powerhouse in dentistry. And check out his Instagram, Dental Tubes. They are just packed full of information. And if you are in a study club, reach out to Nate. You can DM him through Instagram and invite him to speak to your study club. You will not be disappointed. This is clinically relevant stuff that you're going to be able to take back to your practice. And trust me, when we've had Nate out for both the occasions, it's been really, really widely positively accepted. So, Nate, I can't thank you enough.
Thanks, Anna. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you at one of our upcoming courses. And we look forward to seeing you then. So yours for better dentistry and go blue. It's hate week against Michigan State. Yours for better dentistry. I'm Dr. Dennis Hartlieb. If you enjoyed this and you want to get more information from dental online training, then check us out at dothandson.com. That's one word, dothandson.com. Now, as a reminder, DOT has so many other great opportunities for your learning. We have our Wine and Unwind monthly webinars where we engage real time with our viewers as we bring in leaders throughout the dental industry to bring you up-to-date information and answer your questions. We have our monthly coffee and donut study club sessions where our participants bring in cases and we treatment plan these cases together to help you with the dentistry that you provide for your patients. We have our live virtual workshops where our dental online trainers perform the same techniques from their kits in the comfort of their own home or office as I'm doing the same procedure under our video camera. We have our blogs and we have an endless selection of hands-on pre-recorded technique courses to help you improve the quality of the clinical dentistry that you provide for your patients. That's right, with our on-demand courses, you do these hands-on exercises when the time is right for you. So check us out on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn at Dental Online Training. And hey, be sure to share this with your friends and colleagues who you think might benefit from this Sharecast and everything that we have to offer with Dental Online Training. And hey,
How about one of those coveted 5-star ratings? We would love it and appreciate it if you could take the time and just give us one of those great 5-star ratings. This episode was created with special help from Claire O'Neill. It was edited by Ashley Dickinson Ellison and with original music by Chris Peterson. Again, thank you for listening. I'm Dr. Dennis Hartlieb, yours for better dentistry.